This video will cover migrating items in SharePoint using the MetaVis tool. We will discuss the basics of item migration, understanding field mapping, and some helpful hints and common issues that you might see during item migration. A fairly common type of migration that is undertaken by our customers is to move items from a list or library to a target list or library. There's a few different ways to go about doing that, but this video will walk you through one method of doing it. In this case, I'm in my shared documents library here, and there's a couple items, and I want to move them to the reference library, which happens to be in the same site in the same collection, all in SharePoint Online. First, just to show you what it looks like here, you can see that this particular view, which you can control up here in the top right, has these two additional columns showing. If there are columns that you don't see that are available in a different view, obviously you can switch to that other view. In addition, you can see that I have data analysis mode turned on, which is this minus sign right here. By default, it's actually turned off, and it will look like that, which is a green plus sign. To turn it on, you can just click the toggle and turn that on. What that'll do is you'll see in a moment. So initially, I'm just going to take this revenue rollup.xlsx and copy it over into my reference library. I'm just going to use the drag and drop function, and this will bring up the initial screen in the wizard. Once I'm sure I'm in the right location, I can hit next, and this will bring up what we call our metadata mapping screen. As you can see, this shows you a couple fields that are empty at present. These other fields are populating from the source. So the name will be the name, the title will be the title. However, there's no equivalent name for city or owner, which are two fields in the target library. They're not available in the source by default. However, I have a couple options here. I can choose, instead of leaving them empty, I can choose this left-facing arrow and populate it. So I can type in Philadelphia, for example, for my city. And for owner, it's a person or group field, so I can choose an owner out of the available users. And that will populate here. When I hit next here, I can choose a set of options along with the mapping that I just chose. For example, I might choose to copy permissions if I'm using content permissions, or if I want to remove folder structure. If you're wondering what any of these particular options do, please check the blue help bubble. They give you a little bit more detail. In the case of some of them, such as remapping users, it will actually give you a walkthrough on how to do it. So anytime you have a question on a particular option, check the blue help bubble. If you still have questions, feel free to reach out to MetaVis support. We also have a user manual available online at manual.metavistech.com. That's also an excellent resource to find answers to those kinds of questions. One last step you can choose is this create CSV. What this will do is it will generate a CSV that incorporates the source and target locations and the metadata columns. If you have multiple items selected and you want to specify values granularly, so per item, you can choose to use a CSV and it will allow you to do that. In the example we just did, in the mapping we just did, it will apply these two values that I used to all the items that I'm moving, which in some cases is not ideal. Once I've selected the options that I want, I can click Finish, and it will migrate the items and apply the metadata as I selected. However, if you're using more than one item here, for example, if I'm selecting both of these, and I go ahead and drag them back over to reference, this time I may not want to choose city the way I chose it before by typing it in. This time I'm going to use this downward facing arrow. What this lets me do is choose the columns that are available in the source. In this case, I can choose origin, and you can see these are the values that are populated for these two items for that field. So I know that this is probably what I want to use in city. What allows me to see these available values is the data analysis mode that we chose earlier. Because I've chosen that, I can see what's already available there. I can hit select, and now instead of using a single value, it will use the value of the origin column for that particular item and populate the city column with it. Owner, I can also choose to map. In this case, I'm going to map it to document created by. Hit select, and now the owner will be the same as the created by field. If you run into issues where the field you're looking for isn't available here, make sure you're using the right content type and make sure that you've done a refresh on the site. The site connections will need to be refreshed periodically to incorporate any changes you make in your SharePoint environment. Once I've created this mapping and I've mapped particular fields to other fields, I can create a template of this. What that'll let, and it'll be this MV map format. What that will let me do is create a persistent template that I can use in multiple migrations. So if I'm always mapping these particular fields to these other particular fields, I can use this template to make sure I stay consistent with it. Again, I can click Next after that, choose the options I want, and click Finish to do my migration.